Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. So yesterday, President Biden was in full performative lather in his remarks on the occasion of the January 6th desecration anniversary. Of course, sticking with what you've heard from the Democrat Socialists and Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger for the last year, armed insurrection.
This wasn't a group of tourists. This was an armed insurrection. They weren't looking to uphold the will of the people. They were looking to deny the will of the people. They weren't looking to uphold a free and fair election. They were looking to overturn one. They weren't looking to save the cause of America. They were looking to subvert the Constitution.
And it's all Trump's fault.
And here's the truth. The former President of the United States of America has created and spread a web of lies about the 2020 election. He's done so because he values power over principle, because he sees his own interest as more important than his country's interest, than America's interest, and because his bruised ego matters more to him than our democracy or our Constitution. He can't accept he lost.
And congressional Republicans are either accessories to the armed insurrection or accessories after the fact.
Well, some courageous men and women in the Republican Party are standing against it, trying to uphold the principle of that party. Too many others are transforming that party into something else. They seem no longer to want to be the party of Lincoln, Eisenhower, Reagan, the Bushes. But whatever my other disagreements are with Republicans who support the rule of law and not the rule of a single man, I will always seek to work together with them.
Yeah, I remember what affinity Joe Biden and his friends on the Democrat side had for those previous Republican administrations, particularly those in our lifetime like Bush and Reagan. But that wasn't even the best performance yesterday. My favorite performance yesterday.
Hamilton?
Hamilton. I mean,
That was good. I mean, it was a Hollywood production. What happened? Yeah.
Nice singing, a nice theatrical element to add to the other theatrical elements. But no, Jamie Raskin, Democrat socialist from Maryland, he has a three rings conspiracy theory that he unfurled on MSNBC yesterday.
There was a mass demonstration, a wild demonstration called by Donald Trump that turned into a riot. Okay, that was the outer ring of activity. The middle ring of activity was the insurrection itself, and that was the Proud Boys, the Oath Keepers, the Three Percenters, the militia groups, the First Amendment, Praetorian, a bunch of organized extremist violent groups that were training for battle, that broke our windows and that began the assault on the police officers that the rioters filled in on. But the scariest part of the day was really the inner ring of the coup. And there, the whole point was to try to force Vice President Mike Pence to declare completely lawless powers to unilaterally reject and repudiate electoral college votes from Arizona, from Georgia, from Pennsylvania, and a handful of other states. The point there was to lower Joe Biden's total in the electoral college of 306 to below 270. And at that point, under the 12th Amendment to the Constitution, the whole contest is kicked into the House of Representatives for a so-called contingent election. At that point, I think Trump would have been ready to invoke the Insurrection Act and to declare something like martial law, call in the National Guard, and pronounce himself a hero for putting down the violence and the insurrection that he had organized against us.
For more on Lord of the Rings there, Representative Jamie Raskin and other associated topics, pleased to be joined, as always, by Bret Baier, Fox News anchor, special report, 5 p.m. weekdays in Chicago time. #1 best-selling author of To Rescue the Republic, Ulysses S. Grant, The Fragile Union, and the Crisis of 1876. Bret, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Good morning.
So Jamie Raskin takes your armed insurrection and raises you a coup that was all part of a tiered conspiracy with President Trump at the top. Only problem with that is there's no evidentiary support for his theory.
Yeah, at least they haven't put out any. It is, I don't want to say it's fantasy to believe that the president believed that the vice president could stop the count and thereby send the whole thing into the House. I mean, that was legal advice from one of his advisors.
Right.
And so that part of it is very viable. And as far as the regular protesters versus some kind of hardcore inner center, that's possible too, but orchestrated at a top level, and that it was a giant part of all this conspiracy together, I think is the part where he loses people, unless they have evidence to that end.
And the FBI has found no evidence to that end. Is the FBI part of the conspiracy too?
Exactly. So, I mean, that's what we've heard from the FBI. And barring any evidence from the January 6th committee, which seems like it's going to go on in perpetuity. I mean, they've got a midterm release in the summer and then a final report before November. I'm not sure what they're going to come with. And
they want televised hearings now, right? They want these hearings televised in prime time because this seems to be part of an election strategy. For as much as Biden made the perfunctory overtures to unity at the end of his 30-minute speech yesterday, he spent a lot of time decrying, as you heard and as you know, Trump, House Republicans. He talked about basically the federalizing of elections legislation that needs to happen. So there was a lot of sort of Biden agenda and midterm electoral politics stuffed into that speech.
Very much so. And, there are a lot of people who looked at it and said it was Biden kind of goading President Trump to run again, even if he was or wasn't deciding that. And that's the card that they have that they think is a winner, as opposed to these, substantive issues, like COVID, inflation, the economy, Afghanistan, crime, you name it.
Yeah, and here in Chicago, 340,000 kids out of school again. But when you look at what happened, and I was appalled by what happened, do you really think, or have you heard from anybody that said they were actually going to hurt any lawmakers if they were able to reach them?
You don't know. There's all kinds of stories about hang Mike Pence, and they had set up this gallows. Was it just cheering that? Were there really lawmakers that were in danger? They felt they were, if you talk to the lawmakers. And so, there were so many different things happening on January 6th. It was a horrific day. It really was.
Yeah.
I think that there's a lot of people who listen to Vice President Harris compare it to Pearl Harbor and 9/11 and, raised an eyebrow or two.
I would hope, because those comparisons are patently absurd. I don't, to the extent, if you don't,
it's embarrassing.
If you can't receive those comparisons and know they're absurd, then it's almost pointless to even have the conversation because they're so disproportionate in comparison. But also, too, this idea that because a legal argument was advanced, but both by an advisor to the president, of some members of Congress, that that was a coup attempt. No, it was a legal argument, and that legal argument was rejected by the vice president and rejected by many other Republicans, and the system worked as it should have. If you want to amend the Electoral Count Act, then go ahead and take up the Electoral Count Act in the halls of Congress and amend it. But this idea, because you challenged the election and you had a legal theory behind the challenge, that is prima facie evidence of a coup attempt, that is also not only absurd, that speaks of someone who doesn't believe in the rule of law.
Yeah, I mean, I hear you, and I think that that's their premise. And if they really wanted to clarify and be pinpoint about what happened and why there was that even a legal argument made, you could alter the Electoral Count Act, which Republicans say they're willing to do. But Chuck Schumer says no, because half a loaf is not what they want. Mm-hmm. Voting rights bill, HR1 and HR4 are what they want. And I asked Liz Cheney about that last night. and she voted against both of those bills. She says that she's against both of those actions, federalizing the election process. But what's happening on the committee and what's happening on Remembrance of this day is being tied into a sales pitch for those very things.
Your regular panelist, Kim Strassel, writing in the Wall Street Journal about the one thing the 1-6 Commission doesn't seem interested in investigating. And per their charter, the special committee's, select committee's charter, she quotes it here, there's to look at facts, circumstances, causes of the event, as well as those, quote, relating to the preparedness and response of the United States Capitol Police and other law enforcement agencies. There doesn't seem to be any interest in doing that, although you did have Capitol Police Chief before a Senate committee this week talking about those intelligence and law enforcement failures on that day. But that doesn't seem to be anything that the actual committee members in the House are interested in.
Now, Congresswoman Cheney says that they are. However, everything publicly that we've heard is that that's being excluded, specifically Speaker Pelosi's office and the House Sergeant of Arms. That's a major component about where the security level was, why it wasn't stepped up, why there wasn't more of a presence. You know, those are all questions that we don't have the answers to, and it doesn't seem, at least, that the committee is committed to that. Cheney says they will, but I don't know.
There was Stephanie Grisham, a former White House press spokesman for President Trump, was on yesterday, too, talking about there's some former Trump aides that are getting together next week, and they want to do a barnstorming tour of the country to tell people that President Trump is an egomaniac. But newsflash, this just in.
He is.
But it seems to me, and I want to get any insights you have, that what it sounds like is sort of Lincoln Project 2.0. It sounds like maybe some former Trump aides saw the money that Rick Wilson and Steve Schmidt and company made with Lincoln Project 1.0, and they're planning on doing the same thing.
Maybe. I don't know what the formation of that is all going to be or who exactly is involved. She said there's 15 people. Don't know. I do know there are Republicans who believe that if the former president runs again, that they're in a much worse political position. But there's a lot of Republicans who say, I like the policies of former President Trump. And, you know, if the other stuff could be put aside, he may, you know, there are people who are looking to that kind of leadership in the wake of what they've seen in the Biden administration. I think there's a real split in the Republican Party, and they're going to try to drive a wedge through that, it sounds like, but I don't know who's on the 15.
Well, does your gut feeling feel like he's going to run for president?
You know, I'm not sure. I really am not sure. I think he may faint like he is and then in the end decide not to. Everything motion-wise looks like he's going to, but I'm not sure. There's a lot of variables still.
One more topic before we let you go, because there was some news over the holidays into the new year that Joe Manchin and Joe Biden have reopened communications on the $4 trillion spend that got sidelined before the first of the year. Is there any indication you're hearing that there's any possibility of resuscitating that?
I mean, maybe on a smaller level, maybe on a fully funded program, you know, that goes 10 years. This is what Manchin has said, under the $1.5 trillion umbrella. But according to Manchin this week, he hasn't had conversations with Biden or the administration. He's had calls from former President Clinton, former President Obama, Oprah Winfrey, but he hasn't had calls with President Biden.
Well, I mean, he got the most important call, which he got the call from Oprah. So now we know it's serious. That's great. Bret Baier, Fox News anchor, special report, 5 p.m. weekdays, Chicago time. #1 best-selling author of To Rescue the Republic, Ulysses S. Grant, The Fragile Union, and the Crisis of 1876. Bret, thanks as always.
We'll see you guys.
Thank you. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
The more you listen, the more you'll know. This is Chicago's Morning Answer. Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
This is important news. If you have unfiled tax returns, the IRS is shifting gears and ramping up investigations on non-filers this year. If you fail to file your tax returns for a year or more, or you owe back taxes, now's the time to call Optima Tax Relief before the IRS finds you. Optima is America's #1 most trusted tax resolution firm, specialized in helping individuals